Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'm going to explain how to catch jacks from the beach out of Fort Morgan 101. You know, there's always a lot of people fishing out there. A lot of people always hook up. Not a lot of people land them. Usually like 50% or so actually get them in. So I'm going to start from ground zero and walk you all the way through what's going to happen when you're out there fishing for jack. We're going to go over 5 main areas that you have to focus on to up your chances of success. First, we're going to talk about our equipment. Then we're going to talk about lures. Then we're going to talk about rods and reels. And then we're going to talk about kind of like our technique and then how we fight a fish. So like with equipment, we're talking like whether or not you're going to use a swivel for your main line or you're going to use an FG knot. Most of the time I use an FG knot. I used to use a swivel. I always run an 80-pound Andy's leader to 20-pound braid. The reason I use 20-pound braid is because you got to be able to cast a long way. A lot of times he who casts the furthest catches the most fish. So kind of a trade-off. You lose that heavier line, but you gain some casting distance. So that's why I use 20-pound Power Pro braid. As far as my knots, I pretty much exclusively use a polymer knot. I think that's pretty much one of the strongest knots there is. I've been tying that for 35 years or whatever. So as far as the leader, you want that leader long enough that the fish's tail's not going to hit your braid. I use probably 4 feet or so of leader. If that fish's tail happens to get tied up or tangled or touches your braid, that braid's not very abrasive resistant, so it can chafe off and break your braid pretty easily. If you're going to use swivels, you always have to make sure that that swivel is not like twisted up with your braid. It's really hard to notice that. You have to like really particularly check that all the time. When you just glance at it, it'll look like everything's fine, but really that braid's gotten tangled up in that swivel and that will break you off in a heartbeat. Just any tension or that line's just going to cut. So let's go into lure. For the most part, they're not picky. A lot of times I think you can catch one on a beer can, but I have basically 3 main lures I use, and that's swim baits, poppers, or some type of topwater, and a spoon. Probably my go-to is normally a swim bait. I would much rather catch one on a popper, but the problem is the wind, especially in the evenings. The wind's usually coming out of the south. It's hitting you right in the face. You're not able to cast as far. So a lot of times you have to either use a spoon or a swim bait. So I have basically 2 boxes that I use. This is my popper / X-Wrap box. Let's go over a couple of the main poppers that people use. The Yo-Zuri mag popper is probably one of the most popular. It's a good lure. It's got good hooks on it, good split rings, so it's going to hold up. I kind of prefer the Chug Norris's. The reason why, this is a Chug Norris 150 3-ounce. So basically the same size popper for the most part. The mag is a little bit longer. But look at the lips on these. The lips on the Chug Norris is just so much bigger. And with these jacks, we're just basically wanting to go out and make as much noise as possible to attract them. With this mag popper, if you pop that really hard, it's going to fly out of the water. Sometimes it'll get tangled up in your line. But this Chug Norris has got such a big lip on it. You can basically jerk this thing as hard as you can, and it's going to bite into the water. It won't fly out of the water. I've never had one of these like fly out of the water when I'm popping. Basically create a lot more noise. I mean, when you pop this thing, it'll shoot water 4 feet in the air. So definitely makes a lot of distractions and basically kind of makes the fish single you out. There's usually so much bait, you're like competing against all the other the bait to get him to hit your lure. One day I was fishing right next to a guy, probably the best fisherman out there at Fort Morgan, and he was throwing a mag popper and I was throwing this, and I got the bite and he did. They definitely came to this Chug Norris. This is the biggest Chug Norris they make. This is a 180. This is a 4-ounce version. As far as the size on this, the fish are gonna like it, but I don't know how far I'm gonna be able to cast it. I've never used this big one before. I'm gonna go try it out. Hopefully the little bit bigger fish will hit this one. Hopefully I can cast this 4-ounce just as far. I always run those with a snap swivel in front of them, but just not any snap swivel. You really have to get snap swivels that are basically rated for the poundage that you need. These I think are rated for 100 pounds, and I don't know if you can see this, but you just want to make sure that it has this like this extra little clasp here. Some of these snap swivels don't have, I don't know if you can see that there, hopefully it'll zoom in on that, but this just has a straight shaft there. There's nothing that hooks on there, and that'll pull out a lot easier. Make sure you get a snap swivel that's rated at least 60, 70 pounds or so. And if you're gonna use cheaper versions of poppers, you're gonna have to switch out the hooks. You need 4X strong hooks, and you need to upgrade the split rings as well. So think about that whenever you're buying your poppers. If you're gonna have to spend $5 or so in upgrading your split rings and your hooks, you might as well just buy a really good brand to start out with. As far as swim baits, this is my swim bait box here. Normally what I try to go with is a 3 to 4 ounce swim bait. My favorite are these hoagies. These are a great swim bait. Unfortunately they're like $10 and a lot of times the tails will get broke off pretty easily. I did glue a new tail on this one, so hopefully got a little extra life in it. This is a NLB here on a 3 ounce head. Swim baits most of the time are my go-to because they'll cut through the wind good, and the redfish will also hit them when the redfish are biting. The redfish, they won't come up on top and hit a popper most of the time. This is this Tsunami. This is like the Dick's brand of a swim bait. The problem with these is they're not very heavy. Because of that, you can't cast them as far. I've actually cut these open and put some extra lead in them to give them a little bit more weight so I can throw them, and then I glue them shut. One thing you just want to make sure, you got to have some super strong hooks on your swim bait. You can't just use any swim bait head. You got to have a super strong hook, or these fish will just straighten them out. As far as spoons, my go-to is either a 3 or 4 ounce diamond jig. I'm going to use this when it's really windy and I got to cut through that wind, or if the fish are just out there a long ways and I can't get to them, I'll put this on so I can throw it the furthest. As far as rods and reels, my go-to, my favorite one is this Prevail 2 10-foot surf rod paired with a Penn Battle 3 5000 with 20-pound braid. And on this reel I have, of course, my 20-pound Power Pro Super Slick. This is an 8-strand braid. It's a lot smoother, going to allow you to cast a lot further. But like I said, this is my favorite rod. You don't really have to have a 10-foot rod. I've caught plenty of jack on my custom steelhead rod with a 4500. This is a 7.5-foot custom steelhead rod. It works, but you really have to fight a fish on that. My other rod, this is an 8-foot Prevail with another 5000 Penn Battle 3. Basically the same kind of setup, but you don't need all these fancy surf rods. You can catch them on, basically this is a little 6-foot kind of a boat rod for the most part, and I've caught them on rigs that I used to use for catfish back when I lived in Missouri. The only thing you're sacrificing with the lesser gears is your casting distance for the most part. All right, so let's get into casting. There's a lot of people starting to fish out there, and one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of make this channel was kind of help people with their techniques and whatnot. When we're fishing out of Fort Morgan, a lot of time the current's ripping so hard, it's kind of like fishing a river. So when it comes to casting, if you cast straight out in front of you, by the time that current gets your line, you're going to be at least a 45 down current. You'll hear me talk a lot of times about keeping your lure or your fish out in front of you. The problem is there's people fishing everywhere. The more of an angle your line gets, whether it's 45 this way, 45 that way, the more of a chance someone's going to throw across your line, get tangled up, then you're going to be messing with that instead of fishing. What I like to do is I'll throw maybe 45 degrees up current. When I throw up current, now that lure's drifting as I come back. No matter how fast I'm winding, that thing's still drifting. As it starts coming in, now it's going to be down for me a little bit. But for the most part, that line and that lure is staying out in front of me for the most part. And that keeps people from casting over me. And as far as when to cast, very rarely do I blind cast. When I say blind cast, that means throwing out there when I don't know that I'm throwing out a particular fish or a group of fish. Most of the time when we're out there at Fort Morgan, we're just basically waiting. We're waiting to see the fish blow up on the surface or some other indication that the fish are there. What happens when you blind cast is you're gonna basically hook a stingray or something, and then you're gonna spend 20 minutes fighting the stingray when the fish are blowing up in front of you. That's why I don't blind cast. Also, especially with your popper, you're going to take more of a chance on a shark biting your popper, and then you're going to lose a 20, 30, that big jug Norris, $38, $40. You really want to make sure that when you're throwing out there, you're throwing out there at your target species and not going to get sharked because you just happen to blind cast. Very rarely do I blind cast. So now let's talk about what happens when we actually hook up on a fish. You'll hear me all the time telling people, hey, keep your fish out in front of you, keep your fish out in front of you. The reason for that is if you have your fish at a 45 or even further down the beach or up the beach or whatever, now no one can cast because they're going to cast over your line. You basically block the whole beach. Nobody can cast because if they do, they're going to cast over you. I told a guy the other day, hey, keep your fish out in front of you. He's like, how do I do that? You walk with it. If the fish is going down the beach, you walk down the beach, wind as you're walking, keep that line tight at all times. You basically just want to keep that fish straight out in front of you, and that will keep people from casting over your line and it'll allow everyone else to keep fishing while you're fighting your fish. The biggest reason I see a lot of people lose fish is they panic and they tighten their drag. You want to have that drag set before you even cast. It is almost impossible, I've found, to set your drag once you have a fish on. It is horrible. You're always going to get it too tight. And that's what people do. They start to panic. If that fish is going to spool you, it's going to spool you. The only advice I have, the fish is going to spool you, when you can tell you're down to your last few yards of line, just go ahead and hold the spool, so that way it'll break you off. You won't lose all your braid, because if it spools you, you're going to lose all your braid. At least if you hold on it, you'll break your leader or something like that. You just got to wear the fish out. The jacks have no stop button. They're going to fight. They're going to just run forever. You just can't panic. You got to take it easy and just hurry up and wait. Eventually the fish will stop running and you can get some line back. Okay, now let's talk about when we finally get our fish in. You got to realize that those jacks, they're basically fighting to the death. So that fish is putting every ounce of energy they have into not coming to the beach, not getting up on land. That fish is absolutely exhausted to almost the point of death probably by the time we get him in. When it comes to releasing the fish, you know, hurry up as much as possible, take your photos, whatever. But when it comes time to get the fish in the water, you just can't chuck it out there in the water. They have a real bad tendency to like come up on their sides, and if they're up on their sides like that, they can't breathe right and they can't take off. So we call it walking your fish out. Go out there, usually about knee-deep water is fine. If there's current, face the fish up current. You basically want to get as much water through that fish's gills. Facing them up current will help. In a boat, you can just chuck them straight down, and that makes them shoot down and shoots a lot of water through their gills and gets them really oxygenated really quick. But on the beach, you can't do that. So you got to go out there and kind of shake them around a little bit, move them around, try to get some water in their gills, and eventually you'll kind of revive them and they'll take off. You got to make sure they take off. If not, they're just going to flip over on their side and get washed out and they're dead. All right, well, I hope this helps. I hope this answers some of your questions and will up your chances on not only catching a big fish from the beach, but landing it as well. So hope you guys like this video. Drop me some comments down there, hit the like button, subscribe, tell YouTube you like this content, and we'll see you next time.